Hello and welcome. My name is Will Barron. I'm the founder over at salesman.org, and welcome to this week's, I think we're calling it now, Selling Made Simple, the live stream or the live chat. Welcome to the chat. If you've got any questions that you'd like me to answer, if you haven't done this before, just drop a comment in the questions box below this, whether you're watching it on YouTube, whether you're watching it on LinkedIn, or if you're watching it after the fact, leave a comment below and I'll answer it on next week's show. Today is, what date is it? Is Friday the 26th of March. I think moving forward, we're probably going to be doing these on a Thursday. Friday, it just seems like there's an awful lot that goes on a Friday with different recordings and production meetings and things that we do with the team. And so I think this is going to move from next week on to Thursdays. And then the week after that, I'm probably going to have a break and we're going to crack on and double down on all this as well. Hopefully have more production, more visuals, your questions on the screen, all this good stuff as well. And so with that, without further ado, let's jump into some of your questions. So we'll bring up the whiteboard of truth and justice here. Sam asks, you mentioned the word frame on the podcast all of the time. I haven't quite grasped what it means yet. Please explain. Frame. How do we do a visualization of frame? So frame is basically what you see the world through. So if you've got, we'll use a buying scenario here. If you've got your buyer and you've got your product, your product here and you've got your buyer. Well, if you were describing the product to your buyer, well, you're going to give them a quick glimpse because you're not going to share every single detail, every single nook and cranny, all the positive, all the negatives. You're going to share a certain frame that you want the buyer to see. So they're going to look at your product and see this side of it. Now, if your competitor, if they are slagging you off, they're going to have a different frame of view and they're going to highlight this end of your product here. So frame is how we all see the world. We all have cognitive biases. We all have issues from, no matter how good your upbringing was, issues from your upbringing, whether that's negative or positive issues about money, self-image, self-esteem, whatever it is. And these all affect essentially this little window that you look at the world through. And you can change this window. You can move it around. If you feel like you're fat and overweight right now, you may view the world from the perspective of someone who has, I don't know, I've never been particularly fat, but you view the world from one particular perspective. And then if you get really in shape, you learn all about fitness, your diet, you change your lifestyle. Well, then your frame of view for the world is going to look slightly different and you're going to see the world in a slightly different way. Just because there's so much hitting us every single day, information, adverts, people trying to sell you stuff consciously, subconsciously. They're all trying to move this frame that you've got around in different places. And you'll have seen this, right? You go, hey, I feel like I need a new car. And then all of a sudden you need a Range Rover because you need the extra seats in the back or you want to put the dog in the back of it. And 3 days prior to seeing a bunch of Range Rover videos, you would never have even considered that. So your frame of view, Range Rover, have changed it so that you want these products and features that you didn't want before. It's probably top of mind for me because I'm thinking about getting a new car to pull Walter around in the back of it because he's just on the back seats of my current BMW and he's probably going to wreck them. Cream interior and golden retriever. It's probably not the best mix. Okay, what do we have next? We'll rattle through some of these because I don't know how long we'll go for today. Probably about 45 minutes or so. Cortez asks, is it normal for an entry-level sales job to feel exploitative? No. Now, I will preface this with, if you are coming straight out of university or it's your first job ever, then you might feel like it's exploitative because you don't have the life experience to realize that work most of the time is not the most fun thing of all time. We've got to get our heads down, just crack on with it. So it might feel, if you're a 16-year-old, 21-year-old, just come out of university, college, then it might feel exploitative. It probably isn't once you get a dose of the real world coming in and smacking you across the head. But other than that, if you feel like you're being exploited, and comment below, Cortez, what you mean by that specifically. If you feel like you're being exploited, you probably are. If you're being asked to do things that doesn't make any sense and isn't moving the needle forward. Look, in sales, we'll move over to here. In sales, you've got the start point and the end point, where you start the year and where you end it, right? This could be a month, this could be a quarter, this could be a year. For me, in medical device sales, it's always a year. Me at salesman.org, with the sales that I'm doing, proactively leading over there, we do everything with a yearly target. So we've got a quota to hit here. We've got a line going between the two. You're being exploited if you're getting driven this way, that way, this way, that way, and you're not moving towards the end goal, which is quota. There's not many companies, none that I know of, probably some do exist, where B2B sales professionals, whether you're an SDR, you're an account manager, you're in customer success, whatever it is, there's very few roles where you're being targeted on like increased brand awareness or something like that. That's all typically marketing, right? In sales, this is what we have here. In sales, we're moving from the start, we're moving to the finish, and I need to know more about the question, about your situation, but if you're really getting nailed here and pulled in different directions and someone's bullying you into doing this, and this that isn't getting you from zero revenue into hitting your quota at the end of the year, then you could call it exploitative. I don't really know. But yeah, I guess if it's a new sales role, let me look back at the question. Is it normal for an entry-level sales role to feel exploitative? I don't know. I don't know. Need more information. Okay. S-List asks, have you ever closed a deal with anyone famous? Unless you are a aspiring urologist, gynecologist, or colorectal surgeon, I've done plenty of deals with famous surgeons, both here and elsewhere in the UK, right? But no, other than that, I've done some, unless you're in the startup world, I've done plenty of deals with CEOs of fast-growing sales technology companies. Even if the CEO wasn't the person who did the handshake and signed the paperwork at the end of it, most of my deals, especially the larger ones, end up at the executive level at some point. So a few people have written books and got decent social media followings, but I've never sold a B2B product or service to Kanye West. Clearly, I've not done that. Net Games asks, do most salespeople actually care about the products that they sell? Net Games, so that's something that we could literally find data on. There will be data out there. If not, that's something that we could do over at salesman.org, polling our audience and our email list and our customer base. It's a good question. I would say, and there's no data behind this whatsoever, this is a gut feeling. I'd say that most salespeople don't really care about the products or services. And this is why one of the main reasons why most salespeople suck. If you don't care about what you're selling, if you don't care about the people you're selling it to, then it's going to come across in your conversations, in your activities, in the amount of effort, in the hustle that you're going to put in. And I'm not saying we need to all be kumbaya here of, my product or service is going to change the world, and so I'd do it for free and I'd put it in front of people and I'd work my ass off. I'm not saying that whatsoever. But I know with medical device sales, I was selling camera imaging equipment. I really enjoyed messing around with the equipment. Hence, the studio and everything that we've done over at salesman.org. I actually really enjoyed doing all that side of things. So I enjoyed messing with the product. I enjoyed being in front of my customers. I enjoyed being in the operating room and chatting with these individuals and going back and forth and having that little bit of banter. If I was selling similar imaging equipment to an office environment, that wouldn't have been as exciting or as interesting for me. So yeah, in my medical device sales role, I guess this is what levels out the role, right? If we have a graph like this. So you have peak excitement for the product, service, company that you're selling. Well, I really enjoyed the product. I really enjoyed hanging out with the customers. What I didn't enjoy, the internal politics. So the driving everywhere. So it's field sales. So constantly on the road, hours and hours and hours every single day, multiple times, nearly falling asleep at the wheel on the way home because I'd been hustling so hard and staying out so late. So if this is not the best diagram to describe this, but it'll make sense. I would love all of this, and so that pushed me over there, and I would have negative side of things over here, and so I'd end up in the middle. Right here. And as long as this kind of goes above the threshold of being a job that you can do long term and that you somewhat enjoy, this is the threshold for that. then you're probably doing just fine. What most people find is, though, that they have all these issues that they hate. There's very few things that they like in their sales role, and they end up over here just hating the job, hating the role. And so you need to find some positives in your role if you're going to be able to do it long term. And I keep saying it all the time, bang on about it on all the shows and all the content that we do. Salespeople who stay in a role for 5 to 6 years crush it way beyond what most people manage out of any role. These are the individuals that are doing hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in commissions. And so that's what you need. You need to be in a role where you can commit to it, at least somewhat medium term, if not long term. Okay, what else do we have? Freak Mode TV, Adon Rig. Hello, Adon. Hope you're well, mate. Says Sales Maze ED Thursdays. What's the best way to change a customer's frame? Great question. I appreciate that, Adon. We've actually got a whole training program on doing exactly this. So if you've got where the customer is right now, where the customer wants to be, the salesperson is going to take them from one side of this to the other side, right? And in the middle, you have this wall of reality block, right? So if this is the current reality, and this is the bigger, brighter future reality in here. I'll just give you one example. We have, for example, we have status quo. We have this idea, right, where the buyer goes, hey, it's going to be an absolute pain. I've got to convince this person. I've got to convince that person. And so I'm just not going to bother. Essentially, that's it's just going to be so much hassle. It's going to be such a burden to get from one side to the other that I'm not going to do it. And there's multiple different bricks and that can stop us going from one place to the other. Now, how does this come back to a customer's frame? Well, the status quo and their perception of not being able to move forward, not being able to get the deal done, not being able to do this and this because of other people, other variables, that's their frame. That's what they're looking at the world through, right? We can see that there's all this, perhaps on one side we've got potential and we've got pain. That's not a very good diagram. Potential and pain. The buyer is seeing just the pain, looking over here. We know that there's another frame that they could look at, which shows the potential. Now, this goes into just classic sales 101 right now. Most people will start to change the frame to go this side, to look at the positive side of things. They will start to use logic. We will talk numbers. We'll say, hey, we know that we can give X ROI or percentage ROI on this deal. And the person goes, I don't care. Why? Because, whoops, I don't know what's happened there. Let's go back to this. There we go. First failure of these shows. X ROI of these, because we're talking about logic. Now, what the buyer really wants is for you to talk about emotion. And the easiest way to get someone to change their frame, their perception, is with stories, whether it's a customer success story or something like that. And that's how we get people to go from one side where they're looking at the pain of the problem as opposed to the potential upside of the problem. We're going to change their frame by giving them customer success stories and allowing them to talk at the emotional side of their brain. That's what we really need to get across with all of this. Right. I'm going to now do the classic live shenanigans and problem-solving fix of unplugging the iPad, plugging it back in. And it doesn't want to go full screen. I'm not sure why. I realize this is thrilling content. There we go. We're back to full screen. So there we go. Hopefully that was useful, Adon. I know you're a pro at this, mate. I know that was a question to tee me up to help the audience, but I appreciate it regardless. What else do we have? Himmler asks, is it worth it to get Salesforce certified? So I am not Salesforce certified. I would imagine unless you're going into a kind of a sales ops role. So we have the Salesforce here. If you're going into sales ops or engineering, maybe. I imagine that would be useful for the. I imagine that'd be useful as a kind of tipping point, as a point in your interview to discuss. But if you're going into just straight sales, then Salesforce actually has loads of great content on their website that covers all of the engineering side, all of the certification side. You don't need to pay to do a certification. You don't need to pay to do the training. It's all up there because, of course, they want you to use the product, and so they're going to give you all of the training upfront and for free. The certification process is just the tick for other people when you want that social proof. And if it's not going to help you close your target, if you're a individual sales contributor, then what is the point in doing it? Let's focus on what's going to help us crush our quotas. Benjamin asks, what is in your pockets right now? Okay, here we go. The first thing to say is I've got a hot water bottle on my lap because it's friggin' freezing in the studio. I did have my phone in my pocket. I have a dog whistle. I have a wallet, some cards, some cash, and that's it. Keys are in the door. The keys would otherwise be in there. And that is it. Yeah, friggin', I know people have been asking me, I've had a few emails from regular listeners of the podcast. The property deals, it all fell apart. So we're stuck in this place for a little bit longer. And I've got some thoughts of how we can really, really double up on not this studio space, but the next studio space. And so it might take a little bit longer to achieve. But that's why you'll see me with a hot water bottle in most of these podcast episodes, because where we are right now, this building, it's all single glazed. It is freaking freezing. Okay, what do we have next? How is the podcast going? Susan asks, how is all the podcast going? I see you've launched a number of new shows. How do they rate versus the podcasts that you've done previously? So previously, we only really had let me get a black pen on here. We only really had the Salesman podcast. Now, I wanted to expand this from the perspective of everybody has a podcast. The messaging is not very unique anymore that we've got a podcast, come listen to us. Brands and vendors have podcasts. So we partnered with HubSpot, and HubSpot have multiple podcasts that they can spend kind of 10x per episode that what we spend in kind of 6 months to produce content. So these bigger brands will always win from the perspective of content production quality and that side of things. What I feel like we can win on, and this is what's led to the new shows that we've created this year, are personality and banter and saying things that perhaps a podcast like HubSpot would sponsor a show that says it, but perhaps they wouldn't say it corporately themselves. They are a publicly traded company. So there's some things I can get away with that they can't. So that's where we started this week in sales with my man, Victor Antonio. And we've also started the social selling show with my man, Daniel Disney. Now, there is one more potential show coming this year, a collaborative show. And I'm really enjoying just speaking with both Victor and Daniel once a week. It's actually a really nice, seamless process. With Victor, we cover the news, the sales news each week, and so it's more difficult to we can't really schedule ahead because obviously we don't know what next week's news is. But with Daniel, we can schedule ahead. We can record 2 shows at a time, and there is a real theme and consistency across the episodes. There's storylines being kind of going across. The storylines going across from kind of episode 1 to, I think we're just ready to publish episode 10 next week. This Week in Sales is more kind of in the moment, what's going on, and the Salesman podcast is all over the place because I've just seemingly random people on the episodes. But this new one is going to be very much a episodic, if we can pull it off, is going to be very much an episodic podcast. I think this will really add another string to the bow over at salesman.org and add another layer to our content. But yeah, we've also got the Sales Leadership Show. Again, that's all over the place, more for sales leaders. Honestly, I don't know what I'm feeling with the Sales Leadership Show. I enjoy doing it, but I feel like it might be pulling us away from our goal, which is to make selling simple. And we're focusing perhaps too much on leadership as opposed to individual sales contributors, which is who I really care about. I don't really care about leadership. The point of the Sales Leadership Show is to get sales leaders to listen to the content so that they can then share out bits of it with their team, and also just to have more conversations, more content, more eyeballs on us from a sales leadership perspective, because over at salesman.org, our training program, the Sales Accelerator, we get more and more larger groups of people joining every week and every month now. And so I thought we could add a bit to the sales leadership to community, but I don't know how long that show is going to go on for. I don't know if that one has legs. because I really care about you guys. I really care about individual sales contributors, and that's what all of these are covering. Okay, what do we have next? You've worked... So I'm going to read this question, but I'm not going to answer it. And that'll be the answer to the question. Julie asks, you've worked with Drift numerous times in the past with sponsorships. Yep, of course I have. Drift.com. What happened with Grant Cardone at the Drift? What happened with Grant Cardone at the Drift event where the CEO was apologizing for it after the fact? So you can Google this if you like. The CEO over at Drift did apologize for it after the fact. And I'm not really here to gossip on things. That's not really what we do. So I don't really have an opinion on it. So I can't really answer the question because it is just opinions. I don't think anyone really knows what happened. So yeah, you can Google it if you're interested. If you're not, we'll carry on with the sales training. Let me have a little bit of this. And we'll go for another 10 minutes or so. We'll just make sure that we're still live, which I think we are. What else do we have? So another one from Cortex. See, now I'm reading the questions in my head before I read them out loud so I don't get caught off guard. Cortex, another question here, asks, why... So he's giving more information about the exploitative nature of what he feels his first sales job is. So, Cortex, let me make this very clear. If you've got a job in a global pandemic where some people are really struggling, and you think it's exploitative that a sales manager is asking you to make X number of calls a day, if it's not the right job for you, you're in the wrong job. Otherwise, that's what basic entry-level sales is. Until you've got enough skill, until you've got enough business experience to be able to close deals, to get deals done. I assume that you're in like an SDR role here from what you're saying. Until you've got enough experience and skill and network and platform, if you want to go down the social selling route, to not have to make all these calls. Well, if your sales manager wants you to make them, then it's almost tough shit, mate. Unfortunately. And a couple more comments on the Grant Cardone instant drift. Again, not for me to comment on. Okay, what have we got now? Gary asks, can I have success as an account manager if I'm an introvert? Yes. Yes, you can. Let's pull over here. So over at salesman.org in the Sales Accelerator, we've got an assessment. And one of the key things, one of the 12 traits that we cover is introvertedness versus extrovertedness. Versus introvertedness versus extrovertedness. Now, the top salespeople in our data set are all extroverted. Now, this is fluid. If we have extrovert on one side, we have introvert at the other. I guess some definitions are in order here as well because people sometimes get this confused. So I think I'm right in saying from a clinical perspective, an introvert is someone who gains energy by spending time on their own. So it doesn't mean that they're scared of talking to people. It doesn't mean that they can't go into a room or get on stage or make sales call after sales call after sales call. All it means is that perhaps after they've made sales call after sales call after sales call, they need to just go and have 10 minutes on their own, read a book, go on their phone, whatever it is, just to chill out and recharge their batteries. Now, extroverts, on the other hand, they gain energy from being around other people, from making these calls. Extroverts are more suited to B2B sales from the perspective of if you're doing reps, if you're making calls, if you're doing emails, if you're going to events, if you're shaking hands, touching elbows or whatever we're doing in this COVID era, as we come out of this COVID era, should I say, then they perhaps gain energy from every single person that they speak to. And I'm not talking like hippy dippy energy here. I'm talking... you know the feeling when it's the end of the day and you're a bit lethargic and you go, well, am I going to make that one more call? Well, an introvert might go, to make that one more call, they're going, right, I'm going to have a cup of tea, 5-minute break, and then I'm going to crack on. That's how they're going to recharge. The extrovert might go, right, I need someone to give me a big pat on the back, someone to get me riled up, someone to have a chat with me and something, listen to a motivational YouTube video or whatever it is. And that's how they're going to get riled up, because they need that interaction, that back and forth, that engagement. Now, success typically lies, say, like here on the line. So people who are massively introverted, one of my brothers is I won't say too much because I don't know. I've not had his permission to talk about him on the show. But I think he would consider himself an introvert. He would come in from work in a job where he's speaking to lots of people in a clinical environment. So he's not shy. There's no issues with that side of things. He could do sales, but he likes to come home and read a book. Whereas I sometimes like to come home and read a book. I sometimes like to wind up my partner, or I sometimes like to go and have a play with the dog or whatever it is. So I find myself, I'm in this kind of space here. Whereas depending on my mood, what's going on, the stress I'm under, I could be anywhere kind of in the middle. And people call it like an omnivert, but we don't need to do this because we know that the scale is not black and white. There's no hard line in the middle between the two. It's a grey area between the two of these sections, right? So most salespeople who have massive success are in this kind of bracket at the front. But if you are in a B2B sales role and you find that you feel like you are introverted, you are someone who gains energy by being on their own, by reading a book, playing computer games, whatever it is, then that's fine. All you've got to do is suss out some tactics to create enough energy when you need it, when you need to make those last few calls of the day. When someone calls you back at 6 o'clock at night and you're a little bit tired and they want to speak to you right now, you just got to put together a few strategies to be able to force yourself to act in the moment as an extrovert. Matthew Pollard has some great books on this if you're interested. I've interviewed him on the Salesman podcast a bunch of times. So I'll include those episodes in the show notes of this live stream over at salesman.org when that goes up later on. And Matthew Pollard is a good source for having success and selling as an introvert and having success in the marketplace. Brian asks, hi, Will. Hi, Brian. What are your general thoughts on B2B cold calling? Right. If you want my impassioned on the show, rammed up with coffee thoughts on this, listen to This Week in Sales. It'll be published tomorrow, I think, with me and Victor Antonio, because I go on a bit of a rampage on B2B cold calling. And Victor, I feel like I pull him more towards my direction by the end of the conversation. But look, it's dead simple. Here is the one phone that I own. I'm a small business owner. People want to sell to me. We now have not a HubSpot level budget to spend on things, but we could spend thousands. We do spend thousands a month on SaaS products, on software tools, things like that, right? So I am slowly, humbly becoming someone that people want to prospect, especially in the software space and that side of things related to our business, right? Nobody can call me. If you, on this live stream right now, regardless of the live stream right now, if you cold call me on this phone, I'll give you $1,000. It's impossible. This number is not anywhere. And we talk about it on the show. Victor doesn't even have my number. And I'm now a B2B buyer. I'm a millennial, and we covered it on This Week in Sales the week before, last week, that there's now more millennial B2B buyers than there are, I forget the names, Gen Z, Gen X, whatever it is, like my dad's kind of generation of B2B buyers. And so there's more and more people like me who don't have a desk phone. Everyone's working from home anyway, so the desk phone's only getting linked and shared over to the mobile phone anyway. And so it's very difficult to get in front of these people. So if you can't get in front of people on a B2B cold call in the first instance, then how are you going to do it? You're going to use social media if they're on there. You're going to use cold email, and you're going to post them something to their house, whatever it is. You're going to do something. If one thing is effective and the other thing isn't, clearly we're going to spend more time, or we should be spending more time, at least experimenting with the other forms of getting in front of our potential customers. Now, with that said, if you're selling to my dad, and you're selling to perhaps the C-suite of large enterprise organizations that don't have us younguns, I'm 34, youngun-ish, kind of middle-aged. If you don't have us people in that kind of space, then maybe you can get through on a cold call. But cold calls are better utilized and people call these things different things, right? But if you frame it up as a warm call, if you've emailed, You've talked to people and engaged with people's content on LinkedIn. You have networked within the account if you're doing large size B2B deals. You've gone back and forth. You've created a spider web around the actual decision maker. You've perhaps got some meetings. You've got a demo booked with an end user, whatever it is. Then a cold call can be, or a warm call, however you want to frame it, can be really valuable. Because you might shortcut the amount of time to go to a receptionist, whoever it is, to get the meeting booked in. You can accelerate your sales. You can reduce sales cycle lengths by cold calling within an account and saying, hey, where are we with this? Hey, how about, I've thought about this. I got this problem. We can solve it for you. 1, 2, 3. But from an initial outreach, a cold call, it just sucks. They're rubbish to do. I hate, I've done them very rarely. I hate doing them. I will do it, can have success with it, but there's so many other options, and cold calling is just so single-threaded as well. Let me share what I mean by this. And this is the future of B2B sales here now. B2B salespeople are going to become marketers over time. The two are going to intertwine just so tightly that we're going to have a sales specialty under the marketing umbrella eventually. But if you're cold calling versus you're doing kind of modern, what we call you're doing modern internet selling over at salesman.org. Well, cold call, you're going to call one customer multiple times, and that's it. You can use dialers, you can use tools, you can use software to speed up that dial time. But then you start to get in this rhythm of, hi, it's me, blah, 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 blah. And it's immediately obvious that it's a cold call, and so you get less effective. It's almost beneficial sometimes to cold call people less kind of down the kind of like trying to hit the numbers and just go one after each other, because then you lose that little bit of the tonality in that da, 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 when you're saying the same thing over and over and over. Anyway, that's beside the point. But it's single-threaded. You're going after one call, one person over and over and over. Now, with internet selling, perhaps you're using social media, using cold email, you're using some cold calling. Well, you've got all these threads going off at once, especially with the social media side of things. If you create some content, like this video, for example, people will sign up to our training program via this video. It happens every week, and we can see it in our analytics of where people have come from, because there'll be at some point a link below this video that'll link to our training program, right? So this video, probably by the time I wrap up in like 5-10 minutes or so, maybe 100, 200 people will have watched it. Now, over the next few weeks, there'll be a couple hundred more people have watched it. I've created it once. This is essentially a cold calling session in the modern age, right? I'm communicating with you guys. I'm hopefully showing some expertise on some of these subjects, and I'm doing it at scale. The buyer is better for the buyer. They get to choose when they want to consume it. I'm not pestering anyone. If you don't like the content, if you don't like what we're doing over at salesman.org, you don't have to tune in. You're not going to really miss out on anything other than perhaps a bit of business and sales training, right? It's not like someone's got a gun to your head that's forcing you to consume this content. So I create this one piece of content, and it's so multi-threaded, like to the point of like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines are coming off this. Now, not every one of these will be a sale, but eventually they will be. And what we look at when we go through our own analytics, and this is a real problem. I covered this on the Social Selling Show with Daniel Disney this week. It's very difficult to then suss out, well, it was a cold call, then an email, then you watch some content. So the attribution of some of this is difficult. But this is why I don't like cold calling. It's single-threaded. It's annoying. There's a high skill level to having success at it. Immediately when you cold call someone, to go back to the framing idea, we've got the buyer here, we've got the two frames that they could look at. Immediately they're seeing you. They're looking through this window and they're going, hey, this person is a salesperson. They're just here to pester me. They're going to pitch me. They're going to take my time. Versus if you show them some awesome content that you've created, which can be done at scale, which can be multi-threaded, right? Create the content and share it with 50 people, 100 people, depending on how targeted you're going to be with it. Well, then they go, hey, this person obviously isn't completely thick because they've created a good piece of content here. They've shared it with me and it's relevant to me. Obviously, you can screw all this up by spamming people, right? But they've shared this bit of content to me. It's relevant to me. And so they obviously care even just a little bit. So the second phone call from both of these individuals, when we got on the phone the second time with them, this is going to be a very different conversation than the conversation when we've cold called to get that initial meeting booked. So that is why I'm not a fan of B2B cold calling. Now, I will caveat that with, if it's working for you, right now, keep doing it, because why wouldn't you? If you're crushing it, if you're doing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year commissions, keep cold calling. But it's my experience with the community over at salesman.org that the people who are cold calling are not making large amounts of commissions every month, every year, every quarter. The people who are doing what we're describing here in internet selling, with creating content, cold email. If you can get in places, if you can do virtual online events, social selling, all this good stuff, because it's just multi-threaded. And the more that you do now, the better payoff and benefits you're going to have in the future, because you're investing in creating a little machine that's selling on your behalf, day in, day out, versus some chump who's just cold calling and annoying people. There we go. Oh, right. I'll answer one more and then we'll get going, because I need to lift some weights. I need to have some takeout. I need to relax on this Friday evening. It's funny. I was telling my partner after the live chat last week, I literally have a sore throat, sore like mouth from talking so much on these shows, on the live shows. And clearly it's because on the podcast, I'm talking for like perhaps 30% of the time. The guests are talking 70% of the time. Here, I'm obviously talking 100% of the time. That was a revelation for me last week. Okay. Vickers asks, hi, can you tell me how to build trust in cold calling or lesser known customer over the internet and over the phone? Okay, Vickers, how to build trust. So trust, I think you're on the right track of trust has to be built. Unless you are, and you'll see the point here in a second, but unless you're Warren Buffett, you're Elon Musk, you're Mark Zuckerberg, you're Oprah, you're Kanye West, whoever it is, and you've got a massive personal brand, no one knows who you are, and so how can they trust you? So with that said, these individuals who have massive personal brands have built it over not just a year, not just 2 years, but decades and decades and decades. And it can be absolutely just crushed in a second. So again, I don't want to gossip about it, but if you look at David Dobrik, YouTube phenomenon, he's been accused of, I don't think he's been accused of actually anything. He's been accused of being around someone who was accused. So accusation by, or negative association essentially. But he built his massive following in a short period of time, and so it just took away from him just as quick. So if you cold call someone and you build a little bit of trust, and then you say the wrong thing, you make an assumption, you called the wrong person, you're spamming them slightly, then that trust is just wiped out just as quick. So in answer to your question, a lot of trust, I feel, in the internet age that we're living in, is best built via content. Brand, the organization that you work for, and then content. So the last few organizations that I've worked for in sales roles have had incredible brands, like world-leading, standardized product in a lot of operating rooms, that kind of brand. And so all you've got to do then, rather than, or if you're cold calling, is say, hey, it's Will from XYZ company. The trust is built. You've done it. Now, getting into these companies obviously is going to be more difficult than getting into some crappy company where you might have to leverage your own trust. But if you want to build trust, content is going to be the way to go forward. If you can create even just like 1 or 2 slides or slide decks that show what you can do better than other people and other people in your space, and you communicate it really effectively. Nancy Duarte has great books. Slideology is one of them on this subject. If you want to learn how to create an incredible slide deck that tells a story, has a narrative, can really move people to taking action, that can beat the status quo via stories, which we were talking about earlier on in the live chat. You only need 2 or 3 of these and start sending them out before you cold call someone. If you can create a relevant piece of content, cold email it to someone, then call them 20 minutes later, or even better, if you've got any sales enablement tools, hopefully your organization has a few of them, and you can see that the person's opened the email, they're on slide 7 of the deck that you've sent over, or the marketing materials that you sent over, or the insights that you've sent over, and then you cold call them, well, then you've got trust, because they're going, hey, I was just really enjoying this. This is kicking ass. And so that's how you build trust on a cold call. I don't know of any way to do it. When I cold call, very rarely when I do it, I cold call, I don't build trust, I don't do anything, I get the buyer intrigued, and I book a follow-up meeting, and then in the meantime, I send them content. I don't have long cold calls. I'm not cold calling someone and trying to persuade them and influence them on the call itself. No, it's quick, it's to the point. We've got this insight. We can solve this problem. Is it worth 5 minutes in the next week or so to jump on a call and discuss this more thoroughly? I know you're probably busy right now. I know I'm interrupting you. Yes, no, move on. That's what I do with cold calls. That's what I see in the marketplace works effectively for cold calls, because it gives you that little bit of time then. And you might say, hey, can I call you in an hour? Can we sit down in an hour and discuss this? But it gives you that little bit of time to send some content, send some insights, for the buyer even to just research you in the organization that you work for as well. That's how you build trust. It can't be done in an instant. And if you think that you can build trust by saying some magic words on the beginning or end of a cold call, you're severely misled, or you're selling to just absolute smucks. You're selling to idiots. If you're selling to executives, if you're selling to people who have real budget, cold calling is building trust on a cold call is not. It's very difficult, and I'm happy to be proved otherwise. But until I see it in action and see the effectiveness of it, book the next meeting and build your trust there. Vickers says, wow, thanks. This is really going to help. Content is king. Content is king for sure, Vickers. And you don't have to, it depends on the organization that you work for. You don't need to create tons of content. Your marketing team might have, especially if they have sales enablement tools and software, which can tell you objectively, buyers like clicking this, buyers like reading this. At this point of the sales cycle, buyers do 1, 2, 3. If you have tools that allow your marketing team to put together content and then test the validity of it, then you're winning, because most companies don't have that. If you don't have that, then you need to do some A/B testing, right? You need to suss out, if the buyer is here, you need to suss out the problems that they have. You need to make a hypothesis, right? You're going to make a hypothesis of the buyer's problems, and it's only a guess. You've no idea whether these are correct or not. So then you've got the actual buyer here, and you're going to be able to group these buyers together, whether it is from a demographic perspective or like a psychographic perspective, whether it's a company of this size or whether it's introverts, extroverts, people in this role, that role. And you're going to ping some over. You're going to ping some of your hypotheses over, and one of them is really going to hit. A couple of them aren't. And that's your insight. Once you know that that piece of content is well received by 2, 3, 5, 10 buyers, then you just lead with that piece of content until it doesn't work anymore. So I feel like we overcomplicate all of this. And it just comes down to this, which is, this is the scientific method, right? You make a hypothesis, you experiment, you see what works, we tick it, and we carry on with this moving forward. So with that, and coming back to basics with the science side of things, and I guess the final thing I'll leave you all with is science is everything. This scientific method is the most important thing in sales right now, because we don't know what works. Everyone's remote. Digital transformation, where, however we want to kind of frame that up as, there's tons of nonsense in the marketplace. There's tons of people selling, whether it's, more of a scammy training and course, or whether it's corporate trainers going in who haven't sold anything in 20 years, trying to convince you that cold calling is effective. Whatever it is, I guess the answer is here: trust but verify. If you've got a trainer that you really like, you like someone's content, you like my content. I'm not immune to any of this, right? Trust what I'm saying and then verify it, test it. If you think cold calling is the greatest thing ever, great. Trust in that, verify it. If it isn't the greatest thing ever, because cold emailing works better, because social selling works better, because becoming an influencer in your industry so leads come to you works better, then you've got to test it until, otherwise you'll never find any of this out. So there we go. That was Selling Made Simple, live chat this week. I will see you again next week, probably on Thursday, for numerous reasons I outlined at the top of the show. Hope you enjoyed this one. Hope you have a fantastic weekend, and I'll speak with you all next week.